Thank you to our panel for taking time out to be with us today. We're also hoping for questions from the audience. I will be pausing and hoping we get some at the end. So any brilliant thoughts you have, hold on to them and we'll make sure we've got time to get a microphone to you at the end. So first things first, I know Mark gave a brief introduction, but if you could just talk so we all know who's who and a bit about your roles, that would be great. Tom, should we start with you at the end?
Good morning, everyone. My name's Tom Fiennes. I am the GB Commercial Sustainability Director at Britvic Soft Drinks. I look after essentially our Healthier People, Healthier Planet strategy, which looks after everything from an external point of view when it comes to people, things like calories per serve to ensure that we're providing healthier consumer choices, as well as our internal view on people as well. So that will include everything to do with well-being, engagement, and diversity and inclusion, which I'm also significantly involved in personally. And then from a planet point of view, that covers everything from carbon that we've just had long and significant conversations about, all the way through to water reduction and reducing our water ratio, and then through to a circular packaging economy as well, which will include everything from deposit return schemes to reuse, refill, etc.
Hi, I'm Eleanor. Thank you for the invite today. I work for WRAP. We're a climate change NGO, and my role is leading the work that we do with hospitality and food service. We work in a number of areas, including textiles, plastics, and food waste, as well as infrastructure and collections.
So my name's Roger. I'm the Waste Strategy and Packaging Manager at Biffa, who I'm sure everyone knows is one of the largest UK's waste management businesses. But as the title suggests, my role is to help our corporate clients with their recycling waste, and in particular their packaging waste, because most of what we collect, of course, is packaging, and that speaks to my background. So I'm relatively new to waste management. I've only been in the role for 2 years. My entire career as a packaging designer and packaging technologist is hopefully helping our corporate clients across the business, do packaging more sustainably, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that in a minute.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So the title of this panel is Working Together for a Sustainable Future. Are you seeing in your roles collaboration between operators and suppliers on this already? Eleanor, you're sort of a step removed maybe a bit. What's your opinion on that?
So the work that we do is with voluntary agreements, so that's getting people together in a pre-competitive space to identify the challenges and then come up with the solutions that then get cascaded. So collaboration is absolutely critical, and that's something that WRAP does in order to make and effect change on the ground. So we've seen for many years on multiple issues activity and action on the ground around sustainability issues, but we're really recognising that pace of change, the breadth and the technical changes that are happening are really operating at pace. Certainly, as I say, the areas that we're looking at in terms of textiles, packaging and on food, which includes GHG, so scope 3, water and food waste.
Tom, do you feel a sense of collaboration between suppliers and operators on this?
It's part of the reason why I love this job so much. In fact, out of all the functions I've done in my career to date, there has never been so much collaboration. I think actually the last conversation about net zero is a really good example of why there has to be that much collaboration. All the scope 3 material that we're talking about, one company's scope 1 and 2 is another company's scope 3. You have to collaborate in order to be successful. So I think there's an enormous amount, and I've never seen this much collaboration. Is it enough? Probably not. Can we do more? Definitely. I'm very convinced by that. But yes, I think there's a huge amount of collaboration with our customers, but also with our suppliers. It's a pertinent question for us today because on this Friday we have a supplier sustainability summit at Britvic. And we've got 180 of our largest suppliers coming in for that summit. So it's a great example of the level of collaboration that's being done, and that has actually never been done before in our business.
Roger, presumably your role must be a sign that Biffa.
Yeah, I mean, that's collaboration is the one word, the reason I joined Biffa. I'd spent nearly nine years at Marks & Spencer's before I joined Biffa, and as good as company as they were, especially in the CSG space, collaboration wasn't something that we did in retail, and I saw an opportunity at Biffa to be able to do that in two ways, collaborating between different Biffa customers that have the same problem on packaging, and we're already starting to see that, and collaborating across the group. So we've got a very mature plastic recycling business So we are also collaborating with the likes of Britvic and people like that who are in a completely different part of the business, but actually we all have the same challenges.
We're talking about challenges, lots of challenges facing hospitality sector at the moment. We've talked a lot, there are a few people today talking about how that people are still, talking about sustainability and they're still concentrating on it, it's important to them. But given everything that's happening, so for example, I saw a survey a few months back, I think it was by Sodexo, that over a third of businesses are admitting to deprioritising food waste due to ongoing challenges. Roger, is that something you're seeing?
I wouldn't say we're seeing it, but we're struggling to convince some businesses to start collecting food waste. And it is, I mean, we think, take a step back from packaging for a minute, the wastage of food is much bigger problem than the wastage of packaging, probably 10 times the size in terms of carbon. So we're doing a lot of good, we're trying to convince as many customers to collect their food waste as possible, because it will ultimately save them money in the long run and make them more sustainable. One thing we have done in the last couple of years is taken on a business called Company Shop Group that redistributes surplus food. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, or in this case, we're putting our money where our putting our redistributed food where our mouth is on this one. So we're very proud of that, and I think that's another way we can help, reduce food waste for our customers.
Ellen, are you seeing deprioritisation, if I can say it, of food waste?
I think food and the language of how we describe food waste can be quite challenging. So once it's food waste, then it needs to be managed in a particular way. Actually, what we're talking about is wasted food and really looking at that prevention piece. And we're seeing an increasing interest in cost saving, on upskilling staff and recognising that food and valuing food as the prices increase and so forth is a really critical part of how we can all make a difference together. But to your point around collaboration, we can't do it alone, we all have a role, and that's really important. So we are increasingly seeing members join our UK food waste reduction roadmap, but we really need to push the acceleration and that pace of change really needs to step up now.
Moving away from food waste explicitly and back to sustainability then, are those operators that are still prioritising it making more demands on the suppliers? Tom, is that something that you're having conversations with?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what I've just referenced that's happening this Friday, I think that's an example of, or a culmination of coming together to talk about that. So last year we did a survey of all of our supply base, and taking into account we have some incredibly large suppliers all the way down to much more sort of localized niche suppliers as well, all of which are important but are at different levels of their understanding of sustainability and what they need to do as a supplier. So we've done a number of things. The first is we've done a survey to try and really understand where they're at and the progress that they're making, because it's all going to feed into our scope 3 as well, but also to really make it very clear on what our ambitions are as a company, and to make sure it's really clear that they need to come on that journey with us. So we're sort of setting out our stall so that everyone understands that as we move forward into the future, it's a significant consideration from our point of view, from a procurement point of view, to ensure that they're meeting the targets that we need to meet as well.
Are customers coming to you with deadlines and targets that they want you to meet in order to...
Every single customer is coming to me personally to ask that question. And it's really difficult. I mean, especially in the net zero space, as a producer, which means that we're making drinks that have to be pasteurized, which means they have to get to a certain temperature in order to be food safe and have high quality, etc. It's really hard to get to those temperatures without using natural fossil fuels. So we're doing a huge amount of work to try and understand what is the technology going to be like in the future. What's the technology that we need to move to overcome that? So for some companies where it's more service industry, it's going to be easier to do an earlier net zero target. For other companies, it's going to be harder. So the solutions need to be fit for purpose for the company that you're talking about.
And Roger, what about Biffa? What sort of conversations are you having with customers around this?
Well, obviously we're downstream. We're a downstream supplier of most businesses, and therefore we're in scope 3 for a lot of people. And the big question is often around the trucks that we use and reducing the amount of carbon that they use. And big heavy trucks use a lot of petrol, take a lot of carbon. So that's probably the one that we're asked the most often. What are we doing regards to electric vehicles, and we are making progress. I think we run a fleet of about 60 EVs now across the country, some big trucks as well, but we've got an aggressive plan to try and completely electrify the range.
Eleanor, what sort of questions should operators be asking their suppliers? Are those the right questions?
So we've got lots of materials, and obviously in the UK Sustainability Strategy there's some great references to the materials that WRAP provides. So in terms of questions to suppliers, encouraging them to sign up to the UK Food Waste Reduction Roadmap around food waste, encouraging them to use the Scope 3 GHG guidance that we've got supplier questionnaires there, because that consistency in what you are asking of your suppliers is really helpful in opening up those conversations, having the data at your disposal to understand exactly where the issues are, where are the hotspots, how can you engage your suppliers in those discussions, encouraging them to sign up to the Meeting a Net Zero World and also the Water Reduction Roadmap. So we've got lots of materials, and obviously sign up to the UK Plastics Pact as well in order to set those targets, and again, those consistency, those metrics being the same wherever people go, so that there's less confusion about what the direction of travel is.
And what about moving forward? What will be the next set of conversations you think we should be having between suppliers and operators? Eleanor, do you want to take that to start with?
Yeah, I think there's still, this is a very new area, particularly GHG, but water stewardship is also one of the newer areas, and it requires extensive collaboration and understanding of what is the data, how do you capture that, how do we work together so that we've got those, that understanding and that shared focus on how we can develop things. But ultimately it comes down to horses for courses, tailoring it for the business, getting the data, what are the issues for your business on any area of sustainability, and then how can you influence and change that. So have you got the right skills within the organisation to make those decisions without an unintended consequence somewhere else within the supply chain? So when you're specifying packaging materials, for example, when you're creating a new menu item, are the right skills there and the right decisions being made without those unintended consequences passing on to your supply chain? So the more engagement you can have with the suppliers, and the more you can look at the data together and say, this is a problem, how can we fix it? The better it is, and the more it normalises those conversations, so they become business as usual, not a sustainability add-on on the side.
Tom, what questions are you anticipating coming next from your customers?
I think the questions that currently exist, which is about when are you going to be net zero, are you going to bring it forward, how are you going to get there? I think those questions are very live at the moment. I think going back to your point, that the data piece is probably the biggest challenge in this space. If you haven't got the right data, then it's really hard to measure where you're getting to anyway. So I think there's a focus right here, right now, on getting everyone to the same level of understanding, everyone to the same level of understanding of what the intention is, and therefore what the expectation is of your supply base. But then also, how do you bring all that information together to be able to measure yourself against that progress? That in itself, for me, right here, right now, is a significant, complex problem that needs solving. So I think it's less about, I think we know what we need to be doing. I think we're all really clear on that. It's now starting to be, how do we all come together to deliver the same outcome really clearly.
Biodiversity is an interesting one. It's been mentioned a couple of times today. Can you elaborate a bit on that in terms of what that means for business looking?
Well, there's probably a big one and a small one for us. The big one is we're holding, I think, 30% of our old landfill sites, and we're doing a lot of good work in terms of making sure that land is biodiverse, protecting the land that we've now covered up with soil from an old landfill site. That's a big one. In a small way, I think, and this perhaps is something small businesses could learn from, is we are planting lots of flowers in and around all of our sites, and we've got over 230 sites around the UK. So we're planting wildflowers, and we're encouraging the bee population to thrive in those environments, because we all know bees are struggling at the moment. And I think we've just taken our first delivery of our first pot of Biffa bee honey this last week. So we think that's a good thing to do.
Brilliant. Is biodiversity a conversation you're having at WRAP at all yet?
Not specifically. Obviously, a lot of the activity that we do has positive benefits with biodiversity, particularly the water activity that we're doing, but it's not currently within the specific actions that we're taking.
And so businesses are talking about this, but customers, kind of end users, were talking about it. Being sustainable and making sustainable choices as a consumer was really important. I think Tim said, you know, people are still concentrating on it. But the cost of living crisis, I mean, that's going to be quite a danger to this whole movement, isn't it? Because people who were maybe willing to spend a bit more to make a more sustainable choice, is that still going to be something they're willing to do, Tom?
Yes, to an extent. So firstly, there's a bit of a hangover when it comes to the perception of cost of sustainability. Historically, sustainable solutions have come at an additional cost to consumers. And I think we know that, and therefore we have a perception that sustainability equals greater cost. But that's not always the case. There are sustainable solutions that can go out there that actually are either parity on cost or even cheaper in some cases, especially in the reuse refill space. So I think there's a bit of a mind shift that needs to take place. We know from research that we've done that our consumer base, they have climate change as the number one priority when they go shopping, and then they also have plastics and the association with plastics in the ocean is very front of mind. The reality is when you're actually making a purchase, that slightly changes. There are other considerations that shoppers have, whether it be quality, whether it be brands, etc., that are really important to them, but also price, as you've sort of alluded to already, Robyn. So we know that that it's really hard for those consumers when they're making their purchases, and sometimes sustainability comes off front of mind when they're actually in the moment, because it's a very short period of time they might be making it. But we also know that they expect producers to come up with the solutions, and they want to be given those solutions on a plate that makes it really easy and, to my earlier point, cost parity and or less in order to make it something that they feel is permissible to do. So I think consumers are impacting us as producers. We are looking to change, but it's our responsibility to drive that change. Otherwise, we'll lose them at the till point and the point of purchase.
What about other speed bumps in the road? You can see other challenges coming on this sort of sustainability journey. Roger, do you want to take that?
At the risk of repeating what's already said, it's about data for us. The consistency of data, the ongoing sort of making sure that data is the same across the business, because we've got a big business. When I joined the business in June 2020, we had 7,000 employees. We've now got 10,000 employees. So getting that data consistent across the group is important. And I suppose the one that we bumped up against in retail is you set a target for, let's say, a date in the future, but then your business grows. So do you adjust your targets for growth, or should you have an absolute target? And that's a challenge, I think, for us. I think for every business, if you've got a target, is it absolute, and or does it not account for growth? I mean, that's a big challenge, I think, in my mind.
What about collaboration beyond the sector? I mean, is government doing enough to help?
A lot of the work that we do supports government policy, so we're turning a lot of the policy into practice. A lot of the voluntary agreements that we have are sort of preempting legislation and so forth. And the resources and waste strategy that DEFRA published back in 2018, a number of actions from that have resulted in consultations more recently. So deposit return scheme, extended producer responsibility, consistency in collections. So that's whereby you increase the amount of recycling, whether it's at home or in businesses, will be coming through. And more recently, mandatory food waste reporting. That consultation has happened quite recently alongside some government buying standards, so the catering side of things. So there's a lot of work going on in terms of consistent metrics being recognised within these consultations and sort of setting those metrics out for consistency in what the level playing field looks like, how you can then map that across. And what we're encouraged to see is that that is going across government department as well. So that, again, that collaboration across government departments is really critical for then the change to cascade across all areas.
And I'm going to build on that, if I can, may, Robyn, as well, because I think a great example of that collaboration is not just within a function of government, but also between devolved governments. So I think the deposit return scheme is a great example of where you've got different governments that have different plans, and that makes it really, really difficult for industry to be able to step up to the challenge and deliver deliver simple solutions that are going to work really well. So they need to listen as much as is humanly possible, and they need to translate that listening back into the regulations that are written to make sure they work across different governments.
Is that listening enough support, though? Do we need more concrete support from government?
So I think government have a major role to play here in terms of helping and unlocking all the sustainability initiatives that exist. So there will always be requirements to do more, but at the same time, I think everyone that I'm working with and collaborating with in the industry understands that you can't wait for perfection. You can't let it get in the way of progress, and we're all trying to make that progress. And it goes to the gentleman's question earlier. We all need to move forward. We can't sit here and wait. And government will move at the speed that government can move. And they've got a lot of things on their plate at the minute. So I don't think we should necessarily be waiting for it. Do we want it? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and I think the government can help. I'll pick on two parts of the resource and waste strategy. So the plastic tax, great that it's been relaunched. It's changing behaviours, but that cash, where's it gone? Where's that money gone? We don't want the same to happen with the extended producer responsibility. The cash that generates needs to go back into infrastructure. It needs to be protected, and I think the government can really help us with that potentially in the future.
Brilliant. We're coming to the end. So is any audience questions before we run out of time? Anyone? No? All right. One final question from me then. We'll end on a positive note. So this one to all of you, although it'll be slightly different, I guess, for you, Eleanor. But what work within this area that you've been involved with in your business that you are most proud of to date? Tom, do you want to start?
We're doing a huge amount in this space, and a lot of the collaboration which has been referred to earlier, I think we're incredibly proud of, and that goes both ways in the supply chain. But for me, it's the really big decisions that we're making, the decisions that are going to be bold and make a difference to some of the targets that we're going for. So the one that I would point out is our move towards a heat recovery system, which is high levels of investment that we have to make as a business in order to try and move one of our sites into a net zero position earlier than we were planning to do. So it's decisions like that that are going to make significant changes that I think I would definitely point to in the first instance.
Roger, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I reflect on our sustainability strategy. It was launched the day we all went into lockdown in 2020, so it had a bit like UKH, a bit of a pause before we could actually launch it. But I think I'm incredibly proud of how that's developed. It's 2 years old now. We've delivered against a lot of what we said we'll do. Whilst we're a bit late to the party, if you compare us with someone like M&S who launched Plan A in 2007, we are there now. And we're getting towards our targets. We've set a net zero target for 2050, but on reflection now, listening today, maybe we should bring that forward to 2040 perhaps. I'll have a word with our head of sustainability when I get back to the office.
In terms of packaging specifically, and you talked earlier about your background in packaging design, I mean, what can we look forward to seeing?
For me, this is all around what's called the circular economy. A lot of people down-cry recycling and say it doesn't work, but actually recycling is a part of the circular economy. So it's three things: keeping materials in mechanical and natural loops of material, that's recycling. There's obviously making sure nothing ever leaks from the environment. But what really excites me in packaging terms is divesting your materials from fossil fuel materials. So looking for bio-based materials that are the future for packaging. Not necessarily that biodegrade, but perhaps they still can recycle. So some really interesting technology with bio-based materials that can still get recycled and still completely go round and round again. So lots of interesting stuff there for me.
Tom, I should probably have asked you that as well. What's Britvic working on packaging-wise?
We're working on exactly the same stuff as well. So there's mechanical recycling that's already been referenced, but there's also potentially what's referred to as chemical recycling as well, which has a lot of these solutions are not perfect, and we've already talked about there not being a silver bullet, but I think it's how you blend all the different solutions you might be looking at engaging and making sure that you're using them in the right way at the right time. But we're very much looking at what are the bioplastics of the future, for example. Take into account that plastics, if we get to deposit return schemes and those recycling levels are going up into the 90s and the high 90s, hopefully, then actually you've got products that can be made out of sustainably sourced materials that are 100% recyclable, and they're being recycled at levels that are incredibly high. And that is the circular packaging economy, and that's what we're all gunning for.
Eleanor, finish us off on a positive note. What are you most excited about and most proud of in terms of all that RAP do?
Well, that's quite a call. So without letting any of my colleagues down, I'm obviously massively proud of the enormous amount of work that goes across all of the sectors that we work with. There is a huge amount of determination, of enthusiasm, of commitment to collectively making change happen, and that is across all of the work that we do. It's incredible the amount of effort that people go to really get over some of these barriers and challenges. On a personal note and a bit of a plug, I am very proud of our Guardians of Grub campaign, which is designed to reach the whole hospitality sector. It's recognised within UKHospitality's sustainability strategy, and we know it makes savings happen. We've got all the tools, they're all free, there's skills-based learning, and we've got some fantastic examples of what a difference that can make. And it's about engaging people on this agenda at the end of the day in order to effect change. And food is one of those elements, but it's about a mindset change ultimately.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So before I let us all go to our find our sustainably packaged sandwiches and responsibly sourced lunch choices, I'd like to thank our panel for giving your time today. Thank you.